"We have to kill you, Sofia." Commander Marcus Briggs's voice was cold, emotionless, standing on the ship's deck. In the middle of the Pacific Ocean, in the darkness of night, Sofia Rodriguez felt her heart stop when she heard those words. "What?" Sofia's voice was a whisper. She was trying to understand. This had to be a joke. "You know too much," said Briggs as two armed soldiers approached Sofia. "About the operation, about the weapon smuggling, about the bribes, and they don't want you. You're too much of a risk." Sofia's hands were cuffed behind her back. Two soldiers were dragging her to the edge of the ship. Below was only dark water, endless, deep, deadly. "Wait!" Sofia had screamed. "I'll report this. I'll tell everyone." "No one will find you," said Briggs with a cold smile. "The Pacific Ocean is 3,000 meters deep. You'll just be a missing soldier." The two soldiers lifted Sofia and threw her overboard. The fall lasted 4 seconds. Then the dark waters swallowed her to her death. Or so they thought. 12 hours later, when the enemy submarine exploded and 300 enemy soldiers were buried at the bottom of the sea, Commander Briggs understood Sofia Rodriguez was impossible to kill. But before we start this story, you need to understand who Sofia Rodriguez was and why she could do what no other naval commando could do. Sofia grew up in a small Mexican fishing village. Her father was a local fisherman. Her mother was the village's only dive instructor. Sofia's childhood was spent in the water. At 5 years old, she dove to the ocean floor without a mask for the first time. At 8, she dove to 20 meters on a single breath. At 12, she could dive to 40 meters to catch fish. "Little mermaid," her mother would say to her, "your lungs are different. You can hold your breath underwater 3 times longer than any other child. This is a gift." That gift became more apparent when Sofia turned 16. She entered a local freediving competition and dove to 85 meters on a single breath. The judges were shocked. This was a depth that professional athletes achieved. At 18, Sofia was on the national freediving team. At 20, she won her first international competition, 118 meters, single breath, 4 minutes 20 seconds, women's world record. But for Sofia, this wasn't just a sport. It was a survival skill, a weapon. And when she applied to the military at 22, she wanted to use that weapon. Her first years in the military were filled with disappointment. Commanders respected the freediving world record but didn't take her seriously. "Freediving is a sport," they would say. "Real military operations are different. You can just hold your breath. That doesn't make you a soldier." Sofia protested her assignments but wasn't heard. For years, she worked routine duties, training, logistics, support, never included in real operations, never assigned to real naval commando missions, until 7 years later that night when she was working as an intelligence officer on the USS Trident and saw the wrong thing at the wrong time. That night, while doing checks in the ship's cargo hold, she had seen something she shouldn't have. Weapon crates, unregistered, unmarked, and some members of the ship's command staff were loading those crates onto a small boat. Sofia had hidden and taken photos, but Commander Briggs had seen her. And now she was here, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, 3,000 meters deep, hands bound, water swallowing her. The first 30 seconds were panic. Water filled her throat. Her lungs began to burn. But then her free diving training kicked in. Panic was death. Calm was life. Sofia held her breath. Her hands were bound, but her feet were free. She started swimming. Not up, first down, deeper, because the ship's lights could see her. She needed to hide. She descended to 20 meters. Darkness swallowed her. She was no longer visible from the ship. Now she needed to get the cuffs off. There was a technique she had learned in freediving, dislocating the shoulders to bring the arms forward. It was painful, but possible. Sofia imagined taking a deep breath and forced her shoulders. Left shoulder out. Terrible pain. Then she brought her arms forward. The cuffs were still wrist to wrist, but now they were in front. She couldn't remove the cuffs, but she could use them. She started swimming to the surface. 60 seconds. Sofia reached the surface. Air, she breathed. Deep, long breaths. She looked around. The ship was in the distance, 200 meters away, moving away. Its lights were disappearing in the night darkness. Sofia was alone. Open ocean. The nearest land was 400 kilometers away. The chance of survival was almost zero. Most people would panic, but Sofia was a world record freediver. The sea was her home, and she knew the ways to survive in her home. First priority, conserve energy. Swimming required strength. Sofia switched to backstroke position, minimal energy, maximum breathing, and she started thinking. The ship had moved away. There was no chance of rescue. But Sofia had noticed something. The ship hadn't just stopped to kill her. The ship was going on a specific route, and that route was going to the area where the enemy submarine mentioned in intelligence reports was located. Weapon smuggling. Commander Briggs and his team were selling weapons to the enemy submarine. That's why they wanted to kill Sofia, and that submarine was nearby. A plan began to form in Sofia's mind. A crazy plan. An impossible plan. But her only chance. If she could find that submarine, if she could approach it, if she could sabotage it, she could both get revenge and disrupt the traitor commander's plans. But for that, she first needed to survive. In the open sea. 12 hours. Without equipment. Sofia used a technique she had learned in freediving, energy-saving swimming, minimal movement, conserving body temperature, and most importantly, focusing. Hours passed. Night began to brighten. The sun rose. Sofia was still swimming. Her body was numb. Her lips were dry. But her mind was focused. Survival. After 8 hours, she saw something. On the horizon, a shadow, underwater, the submarine. Sofia got excited but calmed herself. She needed to use her energy. She started approaching the submarine, slow, careful. After 2 hours, she was above the submarine, a giant metal monster, 140 meters long. An enemy flag was posted. Sofia's plan was simple, but impossible. She would climb onto the submarine, sabotage the torpedo tubes, and sink it. But for that, she needed to dive to 140 meters depth, without breath, from outside. The freediving world record was 118 meters. Sofia's record, but that record was made with preparation, equipment, and a safety team. Now there was only herself, tired, thirsty, hungry, but this was her only chance. Sofia began taking deep breaths. Hyperventilation. She filled her lungs with oxygen. For 5 minutes, she did breathing exercises. She emptied her mind. She prepared her body. Then she took one last deep breath and dove. 10 meters. Water temperature dropped. Pressure increased. 20 meters. Her ears started ringing. She applied pressure equalization techniques. 40 meters. Light decreased. She was entering darkness. 60 meters. Her lungs began to compress. Her body reflexively wanted to breathe, but Sofia resisted. 80 meters. Her vision began to blur. Oxygen was decreasing, but she continued. 100 meters. Her body was sending warning signals. Go back. You're dying. But Sofia didn't listen. 120 meters. World record passed. No woman had ever dived to this depth on a single breath. But Sofia continued. 140 meters. The submarine's hull. Metal cold. Giant. Sofia's hands touched the surface. The metal was freezing against her skin, even through the thin layer of water. Her lungs screamed for air. Every cell in her body was in revolt, but her training held. Her mind stayed focused. She found the torpedo tubes, 6 of them, lined up along the submarine's port side. Each one was a weapon capable of sinking an aircraft carrier. The outer hatches were closed, secured with heavy mechanical locks. But between the hatches and the hull, she could see the hydraulic systems, cables, pistons, pressure valves. These were the veins that made the weapons work. Sofia had no tools, no explosive charges, no cutting equipment. She had only the metal handcuffs still attached to her wrists and the knowledge from her sabotage training. It would have to be enough. Her vision was narrowing, the edges going dark. Her body was starting to shut down from oxygen deprivation. She had maybe 30 seconds before she lost consciousness, maybe less. She grabbed the handcuffs with both hands and twisted them with all her remaining strength. The metal bent, but didn't break. She tried again, using the torpedo tube mounting as leverage. A sharp crack. One cuff link broke. Now she had a piece of jagged metal. A tool. She jammed it into the first hydraulic valve, twisting, forcing, breaking the seal. Hydraulic fluid leaked out. A dark cloud in the water. One torpedo disabled. 20 seconds of consciousness left. She moved to the second tube. Her movements were getting slower. Her body was no longer taking commands properly, but muscle memory and desperation drove her forward. Second valve, broken. 15 seconds. Third valve. The metal piece snapped. Now she had nothing but her hands. She grabbed the fourth valve with both hands and pulled with everything she had. The valve assembly tore free. More hydraulic fluid, more damage. 10 seconds. Her vision was almost completely black now. She could barely see her own hands. But she felt for the fifth valve and ripped at it blindly. 5 seconds. She needed to surface now. Or she would die here, 140 meters down, clinging to an enemy submarine. Sofia pushed off from the hull and started swimming up, but her body wasn't responding anymore. Her legs kicked weakly. Her arms barely moved. She was dying. 120 meters. Everything was black. She couldn't see anything, couldn't feel anything except the burning in her lungs. 100 meters. A part of her brain started to shut down, the part that controlled voluntary movement. She was swimming on pure instinct now. 80 meters. Her mouth opened involuntarily, the body's drowning reflex. But some last reserve of willpower kept her from inhaling. 60 meters. She was spinning. Or was the ocean spinning? She couldn't tell anymore. 40 meters. Light. Somewhere above. So far away. 20 meters. The surface was there, right there, but she couldn't reach it. Her arms had stopped moving. 10 meters. She was floating, rising, but too slowly. And then her head broke the surface. Air. She tried to breathe, but couldn't. Her throat had closed. Her body had forgotten how to inhale. For 3 terrible seconds, she floated on the surface, unable to breathe, her lungs full of stale air, but unable to expel it. Then her diaphragm spasmed. She coughed, vomited seawater she didn't remember swallowing, and finally, mercifully took a breath. The air burned going in. Her lungs, compressed for so long, couldn't expand properly. Each breath was agony, but it was life. She floated on her back, gasping, coughing, trembling. Her entire body shook uncontrollably. The cold, the exhaustion, the oxygen deprivation. Everything hit her at once. For 5 minutes, she just floated, breathing, trying to make her body work again. The sun was directly overhead now. It had been morning when she dove. How long had she been underwater? It felt like hours. Slowly, sensation returned to her limbs. The shaking subsided. Her mind began to clear, and she realized something that made her heart sink. The submarine was still there, still operational. She had damaged the torpedo systems, yes. Maybe 3 or 4 of the 6 tubes were disabled, but the submarine itself was intact. It could still move, still fight, still complete its mission to receive the illegal weapons from Commander Briggs. All that risk, all that pain, and it hadn't been enough. Sofia floated there, exhausted, defeated. She had done the impossible, survived 12 hours in the open ocean, dove to a depth no woman had ever reached, sabotaged a military submarine with her bare hands. But it wasn't enough. Then she remembered something her freediving coach had told her years ago when she was training for her first world record attempt. Sofia, he had said, the difference between good and great isn't physical. Your body can do incredible things, but your mind decides whether you quit or continue. The moment you think you've given everything, you still have more. You just have to be willing to find it. Sofia looked at the submarine. 140 meters below, she had just done the most extreme dive of her life. Her body was wrecked. Another dive like that would probably kill her. But if she didn't do it, Commander Briggs would get away with treason. The submarine would receive its weapons. More people would die. She had to go back down. Sofia spent the next 30 minutes preparing. She knew she couldn't dive to 140 meters again. Her body physically couldn't handle it, but she didn't need to go that deep. She had studied submarine designs in her military training. These diesel-electric submarines had to surface regularly to run their engines and recharge batteries. And when they did, they were vulnerable. She just had to wait. 2 hours later, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, the submarine surfaced. It came up slowly, the conning tower breaking the surface first, followed by the hull. Exactly as Sofia had hoped, she watched from 200 meters away as the hatches opened and crew members emerged. They were doing exactly what she expected, running the diesel engines, airing out the interior, performing maintenance. This was her moment. Sofia swam toward the submarine slowly, carefully. She stayed low in the water, using waves for cover. The crew was focused on their work. No one was watching the water around them. She reached the hull and climbed up the ballast tanks. Her hands found purchase on maintenance rails. Her feet slipped twice on the wet metal, but she held on. The crew was on the forward deck, maybe 30 meters away. She could hear them talking in a language she didn't speak, but the tone was relaxed. They felt safe. Sofia climbed higher, staying in the shadow of the conning tower. There, an open hatch leading down into the submarine. A crew member had just emerged from it carrying tools. She waited until he moved away, then dropped through the hatch. Inside, the submarine was a maze of narrow passages, pipes, valves, and equipment. The air was thick with diesel fumes and body odor. Red emergency lighting gave everything a hellish tint. Sofia moved quickly, but quietly. Her bare feet made no sound on the metal floor. She needed to find the torpedo room. That's where the real damage could be done. She turned a corner and almost ran into a crew member, a young sailor, maybe 20 years old, carrying a clipboard. He looked up, saw her. A woman in torn, soaked clothing, with wild eyes and salt-crusted hair, and his eyes went wide. Sofia moved before he could react. She grabbed his collar with one hand, slammed him against the bulkhead, and applied pressure to his carotid artery. The technique she had used countless times in training. 8 seconds. He went limp. She lowered him to the floor and kept moving. The torpedo room was forward, she remembered from her training. She followed the passages, going deeper into the submarine's belly, past the crew quarters, past the galley, past the command spaces, and there it was. The torpedo room. 6 tubes, just like she'd seen from outside. But from in here, she could see the warheads, each one loaded, armed, ready to fire. And she saw something else, something that made her blood run cold. The weapons Commander Briggs had been smuggling weren't just guns. They were nuclear materials, small tactical warheads meant to be fitted into the torpedoes. This wasn't just about weapons smuggling. This was about nuclear terrorism. Sofia stood there for 3 seconds, processing. Then her training kicked in. She couldn't defuse nuclear weapons. She didn't have the expertise. But she could make sure they never reached their target. The torpedo firing system had a manual override, a safety feature in case the electronic systems failed. It required a special key, which would be held by the weapons officer. But Sofia had learned something in her years of military service. Engineers always left back doors, and this submarine was old, Soviet era. She knew these systems. She found the manual control panel, pried it open with a piece of broken equipment. Inside was a mess of wires and relays. But she recognized the pattern. She started pulling wires, not randomly, specifically the firing sequence wires. If she did this right, the torpedoes would arm themselves, but the firing mechanism would fail. The submarine would be carrying 6 armed torpedoes that couldn't be launched or defused. A floating bomb. She worked fast. Voices in the passageway. Someone had found the unconscious sailor, wire by wire, connection by connection. The alarm started blaring. Running footsteps. She pulled the last wire and the panel went dark. Done. Now she needed to get out. Sofia ran. Back through the passages. Crew members were scrambling, confused, trying to understand what was happening. She pushed past them, moving fast. She reached the ladder to the upper deck, started climbing. Hands grabbed her ankle. She kicked back, felt her heel connect with someone's face, kept climbing. The open hatch, sunlight. She pulled herself through. The deck was chaos. Crew members running, officers shouting, and there, the edge of the submarine, the water beyond. Sofia ran for it. Behind her, someone yelled. She heard the metallic snap of a weapon being cocked. She dove. The water swallowed her just as the first shots rang out. Bullets zipped through the water around her, white trails of cavitation. But she was already swimming down using the submarine's hull for cover. She swam away underwater as far as her lungs allowed, maybe 80 meters, then surfaced behind a swell. Behind her, the submarine was in chaos. Klaxons blaring, crew scrambling, and then the explosion, not from the torpedoes, from the diesel engines. Sofia's wire pulling had created an electrical short. The spark had ignited fuel vapors in the engine room. The submarine lurched. Fire erupted from the conning tower. Men jumped overboard. And then the secondary explosion. The torpedoes. 6 of them, armed and unable to be safed, cooking off from the heat. The submarine literally split in half. The bow section tilted up, the stern sinking fast. In less than 2 minutes, both halves were gone, swallowed by the Pacific. Sofia floated there, watching. 300 enemy sailors. Some were swimming, trying to survive. She thought about swimming away, leaving them. But she wasn't like Commander Briggs. She wasn't a murderer. She started swimming toward the survivors, planning to help them stay afloat until rescue came. But before she reached them, she heard it. The distinctive whoomp, whoomp, whoomp of helicopter rotors. A military rescue helicopter appeared over the horizon. Then another. They had been scrambled when the submarine's distress signal went out automatically during the explosion. Sofia waved at them, hoping they would see her among the wreckage and survivors. The helicopter spotted her, descended. A rescue swimmer dropped into the water. "Ma'am, are you injured?" he shouted over the rotor noise. "No," Sofia managed. Her voice was hoarse. "But there are survivors. Help them first." "Ma'am, we have orders to extract you specifically. Lieutenant Commander Sofia Rodriguez." She nodded, confused. "Commander Briggs has been arrested. Your photos and reports reached Naval Intelligence 6 hours ago through automated backup systems. They sent us to find you. Everyone thought you were dead." As they lifted her into the helicopter, wrapped her in a thermal blanket, gave her water, Sofia looked down at the wreckage below. The submarine was gone. The nuclear materials were at the bottom of the Pacific. Commander Briggs and his co-conspirators were in custody. It was over. She had survived. Have you ever been betrayed by people you trusted? Have you ever survived something that should have broken you? Sofia's story reminds us that the human will to survive, combined with training and skill, can overcome impossible odds. If this story inspired you, subscribe for more incredible stories of warriors who refuse to accept defeat. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to see more incredible tales of courage, survival, and strength.